His presence at the railway opening ceremony was not well received. He was loudly cheered by the crowd on his arrival, but at the elegant riposte, for which 3,180 attended, several of the fellow states members refused to sit with him. However, de Quetteville did sit only 2 seats away from the bailiff. It being reported that he was extremely cordial, even asking Sir John Halkett the courtier if he wanted to attend with him the next committee meeting of the lunatic asylum. I can't make up my mind whether he was being sarcastic there or whether he genuinely meant it. The opening of the Jersey Eastern Railway in 1873 was also hindered by de Quetteville, pronouncing on several occasions in the States that he was totally opposed to the development of the railway, and that there was also local opposition from at least 14 farmers whose land would be dissected. In 1871, only two landowners had failed to accept compensation: William Godin and de Quetteville. The newspapers reported that they were decidedly opposed to any railway engine coming snorting over their rose gardens and apple orchards. His opposition was widely reported, and he caused tremendous upset in the States Chamber, saying that he would object at the Privy Council meeting. In 1872, de Quetteville and Godin were summoned to the Privy Council, but their appeal was dismissed with costs, and this probably led to his ultimate financial difficulties. Here is a cartoon that appeared in the paper at that time, showing de Quetteville doing his Clamo de Hara.
He's the fat one.
He's the fat one on his knees, yes. This is the land that de Quetteville owned, which he didn't want to lose. Just so you know where it is, the road that's coming down here is St Clement's Road. The junction at the bottom here is the junction with Havre de Pas, so it comes out by the dyke. And that's what this is there now. That's where the line used to cross St Clement's Road at that point, where the garage is, and go onwards to Peterborough. So one can understand why he didn't want to lose it, but that's progress. Moving on from the railways to the Jersey Telegraph Company. Up until 1814, communication between the islands had been provided by an optical signalling system run by the Army. But at that point they no longer used it, and after this date it was continued, but it was used by the states. In 1837 a demonstration was given of the electric telegraph, the first system being installed in 1839. Morse code was patented in 1838. The first submarine cable was laid, connecting Dover and Calais in 1851. On the 12th of February 1858, the British Press newspaper reported that a meeting had been held to promote a link between Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney and the UK. The UK government supported such a development, provided the system served all the islands. So a meeting was held at the British Hotel. That's where Barclays Bank is now, am I right? Yes, good. A meeting was held on the 31st of May 1858, and the Channel Islands Electric Telegraph Company was formed. Because there was no local expertise, an alliance was formed with the Electric and International Telegraph Company, which was a UK company. The board of directors included mostly members of the International Telegraph Company from the UK. The local representatives was Philip Gossett and David de Quetteville. Capital was £30,000. Sorry, was £25,000. In today's money, that's about £1.5 million. But £30,000 was raised, and so by September that year, the cable was laid, and the official opening took place on the 7th of September. The day was declared a national holiday on the island, and everybody had the day off. However, between 1858 and 1861, the service was interrupted 13 times with 283 days outage. So in 3 years, for one of the years, it never worked. The service ceased completely on the 17th of June 1861, as all capital had been used up repairing the previous faults. However, there was a cable owned by a French company connecting Jersey to France, which continued to function. However, it was considerably more expensive for people to send telegraphs in that direction. You could still send them to the UK, but they had to go to France first. So, bearing in mind that the telegraph company isn't working, in February 1863, David de Quetteville approached the States for a £12,000 interest-free loan to resurrect the company, repayable over 25 years. The public viewed this loan to be a way of repaying the shareholders' debts, especially as those endorsing the proposition in the States were themselves shareholders of the company, including the originator of the idea, David de Quetteville. The loan was never granted, and the company went dormant for a further 6 years. In 1868, the UK government proposed the Telegraph Act, which effectively was the nationalisation of all telegraph companies. Companies would be purchased at in extremely generous terms, which included the initial capital costs and a formula to compensate the loss of profits over 20 years. However, the Act excluded foreign cables, and that included the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. But notwithstanding the issue of foreign companies, 2 former directors of the Channel Island Telegraph Company sought money to revive and lay a new cable. What they worked out was, if they lay a new cable and it cost them £20,000, they would get considerably more back from the UK government. They'd get that £20,000 back, but they would also get the formula for loss of business over the next 20 odd years. So, they tried to form this new company. In 1870, 2 of the former directors of Quetteville's company, William Henry Lefevre, he was the gentleman who set up the Jersey New Waterworks Company, and David de Quetteville formed the Jersey and Guernsey Telegraph Company. In July 1870, David de Quetteville appeared before a UK government select committee, and I've got all the minutes of this meeting, which goes on for days. It was embarrassing, to say the least, reading through it. Although he was attempting to promote the original telegraph company, he could not produce any documentation to show he was the deputy chairman. He couldn't say who the directors were, and he couldn't provide the company's seal. He was also asked about the law relating to crossing the foreshore, because he laid the cables of the original company across the foreshore without the necessary laws being in place. He argued that he'd just done it. This was the way things were done in Jersey. Board meetings had never taken place, and even when the odd one had, they hadn't had the necessary quorum, and the minute books were incomplete. So it was a complete and utter disaster. So you've now got 3 companies. You've got the original one, of which David de Quetteville was involved with, and then you've got the 2 new ones being set up to try and get the money out of the UK government for the laying of the cable. Eventually, the UK government made a decision, and the company formed by William Lefevre, the Jersey Waterworks, New Waterworks man, they decided they would go with that one. By this point, they had changed the law so that the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands were included in the UK Telegraphic Company's list. David de Quetteville managed to achieve that. That was one good point that he did achieve. However, he did lose out on the money that the UK government offered as recompense for taking over the telegraph company. At the opening of the new link on the 16th of December, a dinner was held at the Royal Yacht Club Hotel with Lieutenant Governor Major General Guy, the Dean, the Reverend W.C. Le Breton, that would be Lily Langtry's father, the German Count von Moltke, I can't pronounce it, Moltke, M-A-L-T-K-E, I don't know who he was, Jurat Bailiff.
He's a diplomat.
Is he a diplomat?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, right. And the bailiff and 130 guests. It was noted that the new cable had been installed for £30,000, but the post office had paid £54,920 plus expenses of £2,500 and a tax bill of £1,500 plus legal costs of £6,350. So for laying a cable that's cost you £30,000, the UK government have just given you £60,000 for it. There you go. I've jumped ahead of myself. Royal Court Reform. In 1846 and 1859, I'm going to overrun, Mary.
Yes.
In 1846 and 1849 there had been reports of the commissioners on the constitution and character of the Royal Court. On the 7th of May 1861, Mr. Sergeant Picot, he was a UK MP, sought leave to bring a bill to the UK government to amend the constitution, practice and procedure of the court of the island of Jersey. He went on to say that the bailiff was the only member of the court who had any legal education. The only qualification for a jurat was being able to pay £30 a year as a ratepayer, and the only disqualification, the trade of baker, butcher or brewer. I don't know what they had against them. In Hansard, he described the court, that's the Jersey court, as unfit from want of legal knowledge, guided in its decisions by party feeling, did not have the confidence of the inhabitants, incompetent, a disregard of many of the functions confided to it, and the extortion, oppression and injustice seemed to be an ordinary course of proceeding. That was in Hansard. He didn't mince his words. Nothing seems to have been done about it until in 1864 two jurats wanted to retire. They had reached old age and so didn't want to. Nowadays you have to, jurat retires, I think it's 72, isn't it, Frank?
Yes.
72? Yes. They wanted to retire. However, when you're a jurat for life till you die, and the only way you could get out of it was sanctioned by the Queen. And the UK government said that they would not put a proposition to the Queen to allow them to retire until the states reformed the judicial system. This went on for ages. There was letters going backwards and forwards. De Quetteville was writing to the UK government but not telling the Lieutenant Governor what he'd done. There was a lot of backbiting, and the letters do make extremely interesting reading. We'll move on to his bankruptcy. From a financial point of view, the 1870s did not start well and must have given an indication of what was to follow. Although reported as Jersey judges versus the Treasury, this case involved a Mrs. Chase, who was the proprietor of the Royal Yacht Club Hotel. The claim was for dinners supplied to the judges over the previous 6 years. Apparently it had been customary for the Crown to pay, the cost being defrayed out of the revenues of Her Majesty. However, 6 years previously, the Crown had given instructions that no more dinners would be paid for. The court decided to carry on. To this day, I don't know whether they get their meals paid for, but right. In 1874, an action was brought against De Quetteville by Messrs. Janrin, Durrell and Co., trading as the Jersey Commercial Bank, for payments of £19,899. That's about £1.5 million in today's money. De Quetteville was found not only to be a shareholder of the bank, but also had been its chairman for the last 20 years. He had been asked to repay his loan back in 1867, but he'd done nothing about it. He had not been in the bank or taken part in its affairs in all that time. He denied the right of the partners to sue him and demanded the bank should provide him with details of his financial position of the bank and what was due to him as a shareholder. It was pointed out in court that there was not an action between him and the partners, but an action between him and the bank. The court decided that considering his position within the bank, this enabled him to get all the information he required, and the party should go before the greffier for arbitration. In 1875 it got even worse. As I mentioned, de Quetteville suffered the loss of his only son, and in November 1875 we learned that de Quetteville had gone bankrupt with debts of around £30,000. That's about 2.5 million. His creditors held a meeting in 1876 when de Quetteville offered to repay 20 shillings in the pound. Strange amount, that's the whole thing. The caveat to that was that he had to be given a year to repay it. He was going to sell up. His creditors couldn't agree on this offer unless a guarantee was presented or trustees appointed to carry out the realisation. It was in 1880, on the 27th of January, that de Quetteville passed away at Locksley Cottage, Quetteville, St Saviour's Road. He'd been attacked by paralytic seizure, so the report says, although dropsy and brightoid symptoms are on his death certificate. I think dropsy is swelling and brightoid symptoms is kidney failure. His obituary stated that he had been a forceful character and considered as one of the prime movers of legislation on the island. In all matters he took an active part and upheld on all occasions the privileges of the island. His name would go down in posterity, principally linked with the expansion of the harbour. That's St Helier Harbour, the bit that was never finished. He was the chairman of the committee. There is rumours, I haven't mentioned it previously, that he was taking backhanders, and the building of Quetteville Lighthouse, which again somehow ran over budget. So he was once a large ship owner with interest in Newfoundland, but when the fisheries declined and his health failing, he could no longer fight against the inevitable. He gave over all his properties to his creditors, but still showed friends who remained loyal to him. I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to what de Quetteville was like. I suspect it was the norm in those times. We can look back and we can think to ourselves, what on earth were they doing? But there you go. Thank you very much indeed.